Ben Vitale. Chris Petras. Here. Paul Pink is excused. Aileen McDabb Coleman. Keith Batman.
Here.
Joe DeForest.
Present.
Charlie Ripley.
Present.
Joe Bennett.
Here.
Elaine Daly. Here. Patrick Mahonik. Okay. Timothy Lattimore.
Is our mics on?
They're not on.
Hold on.
Hold on. Here.
Michael Didio. I know he's here. Ryan Foley.
Present.
Tucker Whitman.
Here. I'd like to stand for the pledge, followed by a moment of silent prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move right into proclamations.
Nancy Purdy, would you come up? Do you want me to have her call up there?
Yeah.
And would you call up the awardees? Or I don't have their names.
Microphone.
You really need that back.
They turn them on.
Yes, good evening. Good evening. I'm very proud to present you the winners of our art competition in relation to smoking and vaping cessation. And our winners, if you will come forward. A winner, Madison Kaza from the Auburn Enlarged School System. We have Benjamin McAdam Gorman from Moravia School that is not here this evening. We have Emma Lamakowsko. Thank you. Union Springs Central School. We have Chelsea O'Hara, an honorable mention from Moravia Central. And we have Donovan Tanner from Auburn Enlarged. Oh, that's okay. So there we go.
All set, Tucker?
Thank you. Good job, everybody. Oh, you're going to read it. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. That was easy. Will we still have proclamations?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Other proclamations. Cayuga County salutes Jacob Cummings, Eagle Scout, and Cayuga County salutes Michael A. Hulick, Eagle Scout. Those were already presented. The NAACP Awards for the 20th anniversary will be presented on Friday by Keith Batman. Thank you, Keith. And presentation, David Botar, would you come up?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Botar. I'm Executive Director of the Central New York Regional Planning Board in Syracuse, New York. I've had an opportunity to certainly speak before this legislative body a few times over the years. A number of you have served on our board or continue to serve on our board. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was last week, Mr. Woods asked if I could come before the ledge tonight and just give you a brief update on some broadband questions, broadband issues that are being discussed, certainly here in Cayuga County. I can tell you telecommunications broadband service is a topic that's being discussed across the five-county region that we serve. I was on the phone earlier today with folks over in Madison County. They've been really wrestling with this issue. Broadband service, particularly in rural areas of upstate New York, is clearly a challenge. I know many of you get phone calls from your constituents, your residents, hoping for improved service. So this is a topic that's certainly at the forefront for this legislative body and for our entire region. The Regional Planning Board, we have not been too involved in this issue in recent years. We did do a study way back in 2003, 2004, where we hired a consultant to do just an inventory of where the major fiber resources are in the region. The purpose of the study was really an economic development purpose, so if we had a business prospect that would show up, and particularly a prospect that might not be looking, let's say, here in the city of Auburn or in your urban area, but out in, say, southern Cayuga County, we wanted to have some information available about what fiber resources were available, what the major telecommunication companies, which continues to evolve almost daily, it seems, what their basic structure were, what equipment they have, what services they would provide. That was really the first exposure we had to the topic. We've kind of followed it generally since we did that study. And we were certainly hearing more and more 2012, 13, where communities, some communities here in upstate New York, and you look across the nation, where some communities were actually pooling public resources and in some cases building out a public broadband network. You certainly saw that in the Corning area, Southern Tier Network, a project that was funded primarily by Corning, Inc., who put up a $10 million grant to help build out a fiber network in that region of the state. I think we can all connect the dots here. Corning is certainly challenged to attract employees to their community, and having a strong fiber broadband network in their region helps to recruit employees. So they stepped up in a very, very big way. I know Ontario County built out a fiber optic ring, which was financed very creatively. There was a major natural gas line that happened to be going through the county several years ago, and as part of the negotiation on the pilot property tax payment for that natural gas line, the county made a decision to take a portion of this new revenue and use it to fund building out a publicly sponsored broadband network in their county. And it seemed like that was the direction that more and more counties were looking at that time. And we were seeing the same kind of thing at the national level, where the federal government was providing funding through the Federal Communication Commission, through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. A number of different departments had their own little pots of money, and communities were accessing those pots on a case-by-case basis. Chattanooga, Tennessee is sort of the real best example. Tapping into federal grants to try to improve the telecommunication broadband service in their particular community. But then the state of New York stepped up in a very, very big way. In the handout that's at your table, simply I pulled some information off of the New York State Broadband Office website this morning that provides a quick snapshot and a summary of where the state is at with their broadband program. I think it is a fair statement to say the state's broadband program, $500 million, primarily being spent in upstate New York, is the most robust program in the nation right now. The amount of money that the state has put on the table far and away exceeds what has been available to our state from the various federal programs that are out there. So it is a very robust effort. If you have a chance to flip through this handout, the program was announced in 2015. The state had a pool of money, $500 million. But the state chose to go in a little bit different direction. Rather than providing grants to public entities, to municipalities or counties to build out a publicly owned or publicly sponsored broadband network, they're making the funding available primarily to existing for-profit telecommunication companies. Many of them are smaller companies, but there are, Verizon is certainly receiving some of these funds as well. So the state chose to go in that direction, to rely upon the private marketplace to provide subsidies to these companies so that these companies could build out broadband networks in areas that are unserved or underserved in New York State. So what the state did was literally put out a bid document so these telecommunication companies could bid on certain geography in each county, and they would propose to build out a broadband network at a certain price and guarantee a certain service level, the speeds of your internet service. There are 3 rounds to this program. All 3 rounds, the funding for all 3 rounds has been announced. So round 1 and round 2 were announced several years ago. Round 3 was announced in March of 2018. The build-outs, round 1 and round 2, are complete. Round 3, most of those build-outs in round 3 are scheduled to be completed by July of this year. There's a component that Verizon will be building out with round 3 funding that will carry over into 2020 and be completed by June of 2020. So there's been a lot of activity in upstate New York, and the state, I can tell you that I think is important to note, the state broadband office remains fully staffed. It's a small staff. There are about 10 staff people. They have a boatload of information available to communities. A lot of it you access through their website, and you got to get on the website and kind of find your way around a little bit to begin to understand the information that they're providing. But the handout I provided you, if you flip through, the first few pages shows you the Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 awardees by companies. These are the telecommunication companies that are receiving the grant, the subsidy from the state. If you flip forward towards the back, you see the amount of money that's been awarded in Cayuga County, and it's a little over $25 million. Again, that's total funding, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. And then you see which towns are supposed to be served by these funding awards. What it doesn't tell you is who's the telecommunication, who the provider is. That information is available if you reach out directly to the broadband office. I tried to do that just quickly for a couple towns here in Cayuga County before coming over for the meeting. But they have each of the proposals from the vendors that are the winning bidders. So they have their proposal. They know exactly where they're supposed to build out the system and at what speeds. And they get literally progress reports from the company. The other part that they have built into the program that I think is really important is they're also utilizing the services of a third party, an engineering firm that is doing desktop reviews, and I don't know how they do this. They're doing desktop reviews to confirm where the vendor is with the build-out and what equipment is being used and where they're at in relationship to the schedule. That same third-party engineering firm is required to also go out in the field and confirm what the desktop information is telling them. So the state has put systems in place to try to ensure that the subsidy that they're providing is getting the results that they wanted, that was provided for in the bid. So I think it's a well-thought-out program at this point. I think they have good systems in place. The problem I think we're all wrestling with is it hasn't been built out completely yet. So, by July of this year, we're going to have a much better idea. But the other part that is still out there, it's, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is the whole discussion regarding charter and spectrum. And I think we followed that in the newspapers in the fall during the election season, where charter came under very serious scrutiny and criticism from the state that they were, in fact, they hadn't built out what charter is required to build out. So you have two components to this broadband program in New York State. Charter is supposed to address most of the gaps that still exist in their service areas. When charter does not have business.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
As far as an update goes, I mean, a lot of this we already know. What I want to know is, because there's been emails flying around from all the different towns, is, there was a December 31st deadline that some people were talking about. I mean, that's where we're all confused. What is the actual deadline? What should be happening right now? Is it fiber in the ground, or is it just the conduit in the ground? I mean, I've sent Justin these emails because I got tired of getting them myself.
Sure.
That's the update we want. All this other, no offense, state fluff, we know, we've heard. I mean, where are we in Cayuga County as far as, are we meeting our deadlines? Are we past our deadlines? Where are we in Cayuga County? That's what I care about.
Right.
And
so
that's what the constituents care about.
When they were asked to bid, the deadline was December 31st of 2018.
So we're not hitting our deadline, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
The new
Talk
deadline.
to us about that,
The
please.
new deadline that the state is saying is that by the end of the second quarter of 2019, that all round one, all round two, and all round three projects, with the exception of Verizon, will be completed. I'll use one example. So I asked specifically about New Vision's communication. New Vision's, which is operating in a number of towns, they were a successful round two bidder, and they're supposed to be building out systems in quite a few towns here in Cayuga County. They are 90% complete with that build-out and will be 100% complete by July of this year. Verizon is supposed to, what they have said to the state is, in mid-February, they actually use the date of February 14th, they will start holding forums to inform residences in those communities of the availability of the broadband system and how they'll be able to access it. So that's where New Visions is, which I think is the primary provider to fill in much of the gaps here in Cayuga County.
The other piece I'd like to point out on the map for you is everywhere that it's white and it doesn't show a provider, that's where charter is supposed to be building out. That's why what's going on with charter at the state level is of interest to Cayuga County. Would you expand on that, David, please?
Sure. So right now, I think some of this information we've probably all read in the newspaper, but the state broadband office certainly confirmed it in my conversations over the past week. Charter is in negotiation with the state and the Public Service Commission about the build-out. They had agreed when they did the merger with Time Warner to address 145 customers in upstate New York, and to complete that build-out to address those 145 customers by the end of 2020. The negotiation right now that is going on, that I think, again, we've all read about, is whether Charter is making adequate progress in building out that system. And folks at the broadband office were not free to share with me where the negotiations are at. It's contentious, a lot of legal issues involved, but the negotiations are ongoing right now. But that is clearly a big missing piece, because the build-out of the $500 million program will only address a portion of your need here in Cayuga County. The other portion has to be addressed, or the plan is, the other portion will be addressed by charter. And the state is trying to hold charter to what they feel is the letter of the agreement.
Can I make a few comments, ask a question? You're saying New Visions is at 90%?
Yes,
So they're within 10% of me having high-speed internet?
yes.
Because it certainly does not look that way in my district.
Yeah,
There's no fiber in the ground, there's a bunch of conduit sticking out of the ground everywhere. In fact, they've been told by the town to stop putting stuff in the ground there. So I don't know if they've made you aware of that or not. There's no,
The information I'm sharing is what the broadband
yeah, but,
office.
so I'm not sure how much is actually transparent here between this agency and what's actually happening on the ground. And my other concern is the deadline was December 31st. That was not met. It's now been pushed out to the second quarter of 2019. Is there going to be penalties for not meeting the first deadline, or when we get to the second deadline, will there then be a third deadline?
Don't know. Yeah, don't know. And the state,
It's government.
they certainly, and they speak very confidently at this point of where the program's at and how that relates to the revised schedule. But there's no question, the proof will be if they actually get it done.
So in my other comment, so HughesNet is on here, and that's a satellite provider, right?
Correct.
So just as an example, in Genoa, they were awarded $473 in grant money for 2 locations. They've invested $874. So what is the satellite provider spending the grant money on? I mean, they're not putting fiber in the ground, there's not a lot of infrastructure there. So what does that money go towards? Is it lower, cheaper internet bills, or,
Yes.
so they just get a better deal if you have a satellite provider than
correct.
if you have a cable?
I think when we had the presentation at Central New York last spring, they said it would be, nobody would pay more than $75
Right.
a month, and it would meet certain upload, download speeds that aren't necessarily met in places now.
Which, just to let you know, where we are, we have Viasat, which is better than HughesNet, and that sounds great if you want turtle speed internet. So they can tell you that it'll only cost you $60 or whatever, but you're gonna pay $150 to $200 to get the better speed. And then once you hit that, it's back to turtle. So nothing's gonna solve the problem other than fiber.
Tim?
I remember a huge ice storm that brought down power lines and anything connected to it. I know that Spectrum and some of those Verizon are going to be hung on the pole where New Visions is in the ground, which gives us a lot more safety. It takes a little longer to put it in the ground, but it's, I think it's going to be a better safety net to have in case of an emergency. So if you worked with New Vision, which is a local vendor, and I mean, the big boys, Spectrum, and all they're doing is charging our customers or our residents more and more money all the time. So I'd rather go with the local guy who's 90% in the ground, get out of his way and let him finish.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, the state, in putting the bids together, I don't know if they took into consideration the current pricing, the pricing models of these vendors, who has systems literally in the ground versus who is using the poles. I don't have information about how those bid documents were structured.
Mr. Foley?
Yeah, Mr. Botard, thanks for, everything you're discussing tonight, but I'm just unclear. Your role is working on behalf of the New York State Regional Planning Board, and so you're acting as a messenger tonight to try to just give us an update, or are you in a formal capacity?
Well, I'm here as staff of the Regional Planning Board at Mr. Wood's request, providing an update on the information that is available regarding the state's broadband program. This, as I said in my opening remarks, this is This is an area of great interest to all 5 of our member counties, so we're just trying to be a resource, sort of a middleman to some extent. We've developed, I think, a pretty good working relationship now at this point with the broadband office, where they're willing to share information, take our calls in a timely manner and share information with us, because they know we're speaking to folks like you across a 5-county area. So they're trying to be helpful, and I'm just trying to convey that information.
Mr. Beatrice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, the census blocks that were awarded, piggybacking off of what Mr. Dennison said, the Hughes network has some chunks, particularly in mine and Mr. Dennison's district. Is that exclusive? So given that the Hughes thing is like a screen door on a submarine, can the fiber optic cable be branched out later into census blocks that were awarded to Hughes?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not stuck with it.
No.
Thank you.
And one of the things, this came up actually back in, Mr. DeForest may remember, Justin, you may remember, we had a board meeting back in June of 2018 where we had the folks from the state broadband office come and talk. And one of the things we discussed with them at the end of the meeting and after the meeting, just at the staff level, is for the areas that the state is saying, okay, they got satellite, they got Hughes, check mark, we're done. Everybody recognizes that that's not an adequate system. So we raised with them back at that time, well, if we can find additional grant money, would you, the state broadband office, assist us in deploying those grant funds so that we could actually get fiber to these communities that are now dependent on the satellite systems? The answer was yes. When I talked with the broadband office the past 2 weeks, they said, well, is it going to be a round 4? And the answer was, not that we've heard of yet. So I think in the state's mind, the problem will be solved by the end of 2020. I would disagree with them. And that's where I think maybe we can circle back. Some of the state's economic development programs might be a way to access some grant funds, to provide supplemental funding. And then maybe some of these federal programs that I alluded to initially, if we could get a small $1 million grant or a small $2 million grant to address the areas left, let's say in Cayuga County, that are dependent on the satellite, can we use those funds then to entice these providers to come in and complete the fiber? So it's an idea. We haven't written any grant applications yet, but it's certainly, the response from the broadband office back in June of 2018 was they would be very willing if we had supplemental funds to use their knowledge, their system, the bidding system that they use to reach out to these vendors and encourage them to build out further in your county. So whether it's a federal grant, maybe there's other state grant money like state economic development grant funds, or if there are funds at the local level, whether it's public or private, I think there is a resource with the broadband office where you wouldn't have to staff up and staff it yourself, that they have the expertise to carry it out if there was just additional money available.
Mr. Babin?
Yeah, I guess there's a question maybe for Justin. It's my understanding that the broadband office is going to come to Cayuga County in February and provide an update. Do you know, is that still on?
That I sent that announcement around to you. That wasn't about our build-out. That was about some other permit application that was going. They were speaking more broadly about the program, but not specific to the build-out in our county.
I was told that there would be a county-specific update. So you haven't heard that?
I'll double-check it.
Yeah, I'll follow up as well.
Mr. Lattimore?
Justin, what would your recommendation be if you had to choose your vendor? Would it be Spectrum, Charter, or would it be Verizon, or would it be New Visions?
We're not in the position to make that selection. The state awarded the contract, and we're the beneficiary of it. I mean, if we were looking at building out our own network, I think there's a number of factors that we'd have to look in to try to do that. And obviously, being in control of it locally would be important. But I can't speak to the specific vendors or the selections that the state made through their process.
Mr. Dennison?
The, one other thing too, the article I sent you about the USDA, I mean, is that something we can look into also?
Absolutely.
For individual counties? That way the underserved, I mean, when you look at that map, it's like the whole right side of Cayuga County is just so underserved. I mean,
Yeah,
because
one of
it just, sorry, it's just, I don't know. It's not a lot of money, the whole HughesNet thing, but it seems kind of stupid to throw money away, basically, because you're throwing some money out there for satellite, and trust me, we have satellite. It sucks. And then 2 years from now, you know, maybe the fiber will be out there. So you're just throwing that money away in plain English. I mean, you might better, if we can get other grants, USDA, whatever, you know, do the job once rather than throw a bunch of money away and do it a second time.
The way the state explained it at the meeting last spring was that nobody from the private sector bid on those portions. They couldn't subsidize them. They went up to a certain threshold, then they expanded it. Nobody submitted a bid to build it out, and therefore they went back to HughesNet and trying to subsidize it and ensure more adequate upload, download speeds. I'm not, saying that was the right call, but that was the explanation that was provided at that time.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Whitmer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Minutes to approve, November 27th, 2018.
Second.
December 13th. Alrighty then.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's carried. Public to be heard. Any public to be heard? Mr. Lattimore.
I have a young lady who's, Ms. Steigerwald wanted to mention something about, something the governor said the other day about banning plastic bags. Ms. Steigerwald wanted to make a little statement. You can go to the podium there.
Podium here.
Thank you.
We ran into the gas station and had a little talk, so I said, well, why don't you come and inform the legislators?
If you could keep it 5 minutes or less.
Okay.
She's from Hawaii now, or just recently returned.
Yes, we recently returned here to Auburn, New York, where I was born. And I'm here today to express my concern about the use of plastic here in Auburn. And so the production and the use of plastic actually affects the air, the water, the birds, the fish, and then in turn affects the humans. So our children, all of us, every single human. So I was wondering, I'm here to ask if together we could come up with some solutions to address this problem. So, an idea that I had was maybe reducing the use of plastic bags and/or straws, or even banning them. Or maybe we could come up with some different ideas together. So I don't know everybody. Would you like to help?
Well, this is more of a present your case, and, I mean, we can take it to a committee for discussion or something in our committee cycle. I don't know who we want to task with that, Health and Human, or?
Yeah, well, we did, at Mr. Ripley's request, this is on our work agenda, as something we want to bring forward in 2019. The governor has now put it, looks like it's putting it in the executive budget, so we kind of slowed down to see if the state passes the plastic bag ban, then we wouldn't need to do it at the county level.
Right. So if it goes through on the state level, it's going to happen here. So I guess we could wait and see for that, but otherwise, it sounds like Charlie is, we're going to be discussing it.
Awesome. So when will the state know if they're going to do it?
April?
Yeah, during the course of the legislative cycle.
Okay, awesome.
And we'll be in Albany next week to find out, about NISAC's legislative agenda, which is the Association of Counties. But the governor has proposed it, I think, as part of the executive budget.
So in April, we'll know more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to do your appointments? You tell me your appointments, or just ask for approval of appointments?
You were excused.
Okay.
Somebody wants to,
Appointments and reappointments?
I move them.
start a second. Discussion. All in favor of the few appointments and reappointments?
Aye.
Any opposed? Appointments are carried.
Communication and announcements?
Move 'em.
Second.
All in favor?
What-
Did you want to discuss them?
No, is that a motion to waive them?
Well, yeah. that's fine. Motion to waive, yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, I want to read them.
Carried. Mr. Durant.
Good evening, great to be here with you. Before I get started my report, I want to introduce one of our trustees, Angela Dabo. Thanks for being here with me. Today starts the beginning of our spring term. Certainly always is exciting to get back going again after a few weeks off for the intersession break. And, we're underway in our spring session. Similar to you, what we just talked about, this also really kicks off in January. Our advocacy campaign for the community college funding, the executive budget being released last week, at least in draft form, as in years past, represents a $0 increase for community college funding. And, the community college presidents are asking for something different than what currently exists. And that's ultimately a more predictable model that includes a floor that will allow us to have at least a baseline to be able to plan on and predict in our future. So over the next couple of months, and certainly in February when I come here to address you, I'll be very clear in what it is we're asking for from our legislative and elected officials, and certainly from consideration throughout the process. But ultimately, when you're looking at flat level funding for Cayuga Community College, that's going to be a loss of state aid. Given the model that's based on enrollment and previous year trends, that it will result in us to be down. This is a very similar starting point that we've been at for the last number of years, and we'll continue to do the best that we can over the next 3 months or so in advocating not only on the behalf of the institution, but on your behalf and for our students. And so we'll appreciate all of your support along the way as well as we get going. Also included in the at least the preliminary budget is actually 3 capital projects that represent certainly the vision of the institution, priorities of the institution on a capital side that our trustees have supported and you also supported in the December meeting. So we'll continue to advocate for their inclusion to stay in the budget when it's through its adoption. But ultimately, the $2.5 million for Cornell Cooperative extension, renovation, and enhancement of that building, that was included in the initial draft form, as well as $1 million for a child care center renovation or possible acquisition, which I'll speak about in a moment, and a $100,000 deferred maintenance upgrade particularly for the Auburn campus. Each of those projects in their own right, if you recall that you approved last month, represented local share matching at 50% that have been secured through a number of ways, none of it so far necessarily from you or from the taxpayers, but working through other programs to be able to secure those funds. So again, when I talked to you in February about our advocacy program and our plan and our approach, taking more of a system-wide look at this, I'll also be asking you to recognize the fact that we want to maintain the inclusion of those capital projects within the executive budget as well, because we'll be able to get 50% reimbursement for those things. In addition to that, we also have our provost search underway, as I talked about in previous months. Hopefully over the course of the next couple of months, we'll be identifying candidates to bring to campus, conducting interviews, and ultimately looking to make a selection in late spring. As of the target date for applications, we did receive over 40 applications for that particular position. Those of you unfamiliar with what the provost or the vice president of academic affairs is typically for an organization, for us it would be our number 2 position at the institution, our chief academic officer, so it's a critical one when it comes to our planning and certainly to our supporting, leading our faculty. We continue to be actively involved in the downtown revitalization initiative. We just actually I just came from a meeting associated with that in the planning committee prior to this one. It's been a great pleasure of mine to be able to serve as part of the process, and certainly recusing myself from many of the projects related to college. But if I step aside and just talk about the project at the college, we certainly have an application in there for a Culinary Arts Center. Our trustees authorized me to be able to negotiate and finalize an agreement to be able to create a Culinary Arts Center in the facility currently known as Plaza for the Arts, in what used to be a restaurant that was occupied there. The standing ready kitchen and facility that's there gives us a great foundation, if you will, to be able to create what it is that we're looking to do there. The curriculum associated with the Culinary Arts program was actually approved well over a year ago. It has been approved by SUNY. We're looking to get final approval by state ed. It takes a little bit of time. We're hopeful for that in relatively short order. But the vision for a culinary center is beyond just the core of what we do, which is to educate and train chefs and to be able to educate and train individuals in the area of hospitality and tourism, which we think fundamentally as a comprehensive community college in this community represents sort of our commitment to one of the top sort of economic drivers and industries, that we're also looking to be able to build out our commitment to the area of non-credit leisure learning, and certainly looking at other ways to partner with community assets. The DRI process, if it's a successful project that gets recommended by the planning committee and ultimately awarded by the state, the $800,000 that we're asking for will likely allow us to have the extra equipment that's needed, the renovations and enhancement that's needed to be able to make sure we have a state-of-the-art teaching kitchen to be able to instruct our students and to deliver on the quality program that we're committed to offer. And so certainly would appreciate your support as we go through that, and will allow us to help see this vision be realized. In your packet tonight, I believe, is a resolution associated with an acquisition of a property. That property, as I think most commonly known as the neighborhood house, is one that the college has negotiated and reached a purchase agreement with the entity that was selling it. And the vision here, of course, is as simple as the capital project was that you approved last month. This gives us the opportunity to be able to acquire the property, gives us the opportunity to have the funds already secured to renovate, enhance, and essentially make it brand new, and will allow us to do another piece of our important commitment to this community, which is to help address, in a small way, some of the crisis that identifies when it comes to quality childcare in our community. And so we know by having this facility, by turning it into a state-of-the-art facility and refreshing it the way that it's been, that we're going to be able to not only serve the students we currently serve, but to be able to expand our offerings, to be able to serve more children in the community, and to be able to better support our students, faculty, and staff. This would not be possible without the gift and the support of our Faculty Student Association. They certainly have committed to myself and to our trustees and to you $500,000 locally to allow us to do that, and we're going to be seeking the remaining $500,000 from the state. If all goes well, pending your approval tonight, final approval by our trustees, and approval by the state, we'll be looking to break ground as early as this summer and be able to try to get that facility open as soon as possible. So with that, I would appreciate your support in that resolution. I think it's a great thing for our institution, and certainly a wonderful thing that we feel proud about to be able to do with our community.
Mr. Lattimore.
Doctor, I happened to be at Senator Antonacci's town hall meeting in Seneca, or in Skaneateles, and one of the Hill-Rom people were there, one of the chieftains, and indicated that they're having a hard time trying to find engineers. And I know I'm all for eating culinary, but I'd like to see us somehow get back into the tech business. And Mr. Ripley and I were at Kathy Hochul's thing at OCC. We did speak to the president. She had nice words to say about you, and it's good to see her in communication with her. I know we got a contact with Lemoyne too, which is good. But the lieutenant governor did mention that we need to have more engineers and scientists. And the STEM programs, I don't know whether we're looking at those at all, or...
We actually have many of those programs that already exist for us. I mean, it's a great question, perhaps a chance to refresh. I mean, we have one of our most popular degrees we have on campus is a liberal arts degree in math science that has a focus with articulation in many of our technical schools that are out there for bachelor's degrees in science and all the STEM areas. We have engineering technology, we have computer science, we have programs in manufacturing. When it comes to if an individual in this community wants to be able to get a baseline in technology for pursuit of a four-year degree or career, we have exactly the array of courses and programs that we offer to be able to line them well up for transfer.
Well, we know we put a satellite on the backside of the moon with the Chinese, and we know we went to Mars, and I know that you had the technology at the college that I wanted to see enhanced, so if we could push that, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Foley.
I understand.
Doctor,
Yeah.
did I hear you correctly that you are expecting enrollment to be down for 2019?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to...
Yeah, so our enrollment is anticipated to be down this year. We knew this back in October. I think I've spoke about it every month. We anticipate to be down about 3% to budget, 6% year to year. When that, from our institution's perspective, last year was the first year we had growth since about 2012. Not to speak for my colleagues, but most community colleges across the state are down. Some are down significantly. Certainly our interest is primarily local, of course, but the demographics, certainly the competition out there to attract students to be able to go, and certainly the increase of online activity to be able to make it as convenient as possible, well, with other financial incentives, I think have all been contributors to it. But the reality is, and this is what the primary tenor is that I talk about with our trustees, and this is our guiding principle, it's okay to be a slightly smaller institution if you have high quality programs, if your bottom line is you're meeting your bottom line and you're able to live within your means. And so we're making decisions today with the future in mind. We're also identifying what we can do to be able to certainly strategize to incentivize more students to come to us. I mean, these are part of the rationale between athletic investments, new program developments in culinary arts, and certainly our workforce development initiative at Cornell Cooperative. We have to invest in our future and not just retreat, but we need to do so in a way that we know that we can be able to afford it and to be able to not take away from our quality of programs and our services for students. And I know that it's not necessarily a college thing, it's a faculty student association thing, but look at the opportunity we have here with the child care center that's in front of you tonight. You have to secure a building, renovate a building, and open a building with no long-term debt. There's no other way to have much minimal risk than to be able to secure something, open it, and not have to worry about a future that has to pay it down. Yes, there are ongoing operational expenses and those things that obviously exist, but it'd also be a college asset that we'll be able to leverage and utilize too. So, I think that's the type of thought that's going into these recommendations and ultimately to our planning and decision making.
Mr. Dennison.
Just out of curiosity, has this ever been discussed? I mean, we have a Cayuga, Onondaga, BOCES. Onondaga Community College used to have 10, 12,000 students. They're down to high fours now, around 5,000. Cayuga used to have considerably more than what we have. We're down. Has there ever been any discussion, knowing the demographics of the area, of making a Cayuga, Onondaga Community College? I mean, I'm just curious, because we have that for BOCES for reasons.
Well, 2 points to that, and then I'll address your question relatively directly. The first one is, we serve just as many people today as we did 4 years ago. Last year, the college served over 300 more individuals in the fall than it did the previous fall.
But what about 10, 12 years ago? That's my point. I mean, same thing with Onondaga County. I'm not talking 4 years ago. I'm talking, I don't know. It just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's a trend. I mean, we're seeing it. It's not going to stop.
I don't disagree with you, but my point...
And we're fighting for the same students, because you're talking a half an hour drive. So I don't know. I'm just asking if it's something that's feasible to think about, because two community colleges that close cannot continue to have that kind of population drop and survive. Look at our high schools. Look at the graduating classes of high schools. They used to be 90, 100 kids. They're 50, 60 now. And you're fighting for those same kids.
I think there's two key points that need to be made with that, though. Number one, the size of your institution does not necessarily determine your viability. And since I arrived here, prior to my arrival, the college is down 30+% enrollment. Since I arrived here, we tripled our fund balance. We've had 4 balanced budgets, and even this year, when I say we're going to be down 3%, we've already identified the plan to have a balanced budget for us. And so when you're looking out 10 or 12 years from now, I think a number of things need to be potentially explored or thought of. But my job as the college president is to be able to assure that we're as viable as possible and that we're continually moving ourselves forward. That's our commitment to our students and certainly our commitment to the greater good. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at opportunities to potentially share services, to be able to maximize resources, and all of those other things. But when it comes to who they were, who we are, and any of those other components, we're going to continue to do our job to lead our institution to be able to be poised to be successful. Now, we're not above partnerships. I certainly would love to collaborate with other community colleges for 1+1 programs if they exist and make sense. I'm certainly looking at other 4-year pathways and job creation opportunities that exist. But ultimately, as an institution, we're as strong as you can be in a declining environment. And we'll continue to do our part to be able to make sure that we are part of your equation to attracting talent and individuals and families here at this community to help them thrive. And that's what we're committed to do. And certainly, I think we're doing the best that we can given the resources that we have at this time.
Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Doctor. My question is there a direct causal relationship between the performance of the economy? I thought I heard this somewhere, so this is where I'm going. Could the enrollment numbers be reflective of a better job market? Therefore, that's why your numbers are down?
Yeah, so historically people will tell you that when the economy is not as strong, community college enrollments tend to increase and vice versa. That is something that has, I think, been realized by many institutions over time, and certainly when the economy was down in 2008, 9, and 10, Cayuga Community College and many others, most others, all had record enrollments at those particular times. And over the last couple of years, I think it's one of the factors. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but it certainly is one of the factors, particularly for your adult learners and your older and the older student demographic.
And if I could just ask a follow-up question with regard to Mr. Dennison's suggestion, would we be able to, it's my understanding to get the lower tuition, you have to be a resident of the county, is that correct?
Actually, no, just a resident of the state.
Just the state? Okay.
Yeah. However, it's also the way that we're currently funded in New York State is any resident of Cayuga County who goes out of Cayuga County to another college, the Cayuga County is paying a chargeback rate to that particular institution. Similarly, when we have students who come from out of county to Cayuga Community College, those respective counties pay a chargeback rate. And over, about 60% of our student body at Cayuga Community College comes from outside of Cayuga County. So your portion is about $3 million in county sponsorship. This year, we're anticipating to collect nearly $5.5 million in out-of-county sponsorships based on chargebacks.
Mr. Lattimore.
One more question, I don't want to keep you too long, Doctor, but
Here all night.
the nursing program's been very successful. I've been to graduations, and did OCC double their nursing program, or one of the other smaller schools or something? Why aren't we expanding some of our successful programs?
I can't speak to what other schools have done with their particular program. I can tell you this, when it comes to our nursing program, we have expanded in recent years. We added a Fulton cohort to be able to support that particular group. Then we added a Fulton cohort to accept students every year. When you're talking about nursing, you're talking about a program that certainly has a great deal of interest, but you're also talking about a program that has very strict admissions criteria, because we have been very fortunate in recent years to have pass rates on the credentialing exam at the end at 100% for a number of years, 99%. But when you're bringing students into that particular program, you need to be able to get through and complete it on time within 2 years, and you need to be able to have a high GPA. It's the most selective program we have at an institution, which is very similar to other community colleges. When it comes to growth of a particular nursing program, you also have to look at the cost impacts for that and the student availability with likelihood of being successful. But when it comes to us, you're also looking at the cost to be able to bring in credentialed faculty to make sure you meet accreditation standards, In addition to that, you also need to make sure you have appropriate clinical sites and clinical spaces with all the other programs that exist to be able to serve students within their needs in a timely way.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Durant? Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Committee reports to individual legislators' reports. Anybody? Aileen?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to call your attention. I put something in each of your mailboxes today. Wanted to announce that the Wasco Lake Watershed Management Council introduced our new executive director today at our morning meeting. His name is Dr. Adam Epler, and he comes to us from Onondaga County. He earned his PhD at ESF. And just to remind this group, we received 30 applications. We narrowed them to 5 interviews. From there, we identified 2 strong candidates. Those candidates were vetted by all of the members of the Management Council, as well as our technical advisors. And then Adam was chosen by majority of that group. So we're very happy to welcome him, and we're very excited for his presence on the council as our executive director.
Wish we could get 30 applicants for some of our jobs here. That's good. Mr. Lattimore?
Legislator Ripley and I had went to the hospital to visit the VA. I know that there's been a couple articles in the paper in regards to the VA buying the old Rite Aid on Genesee Street, which is now being taxed, which will probably be taken off the tax rolls. And maybe some revenue leaving the hospital. So, Mr. Ripley, you want to maybe fill in some of the blanks there? Or
Yeah, I guess the hospital was getting $55 per veteran per visit, so the hospital's gonna be losing that if they move to Rite Aid. Of course, you're gonna lose the tax revenue with it becoming a VA clinic.
Did the VA actually buy the building, or is it going to, I was curious if it was going to be privately operated,
It
or?
was totally out of our hands. The federal government agreed to do this. So we're left holding back. We might have been able to intervene early on, but not now. They've already started reconstruction over there. It's gonna happen.
well, as long as the VA, the patients are being taken care of, you know,
That's the main thing.
that's our main concern. But I hate to see a valuable asset leave the hospital to go to a building that's now being taxed and now be taken off the tax rolls.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes, back to the executive director of Wasco Lake Watershed. Is there a salary attached to that, and who funds this position?
Do you want me to answer?
Go ahead, Aileen.
The Management Council is a 501c3, so it's a nonprofit organization, and it's funded by the water users, the taxpayers of Owasco and the taxpayers of Auburn. And the salary, I believe, is $70,000. And I don't have a further breakdown, but I can give that to you, Mr. Bennett. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Dennison?
Yeah, just one quick question, add on to that, Aileen. Where's he gonna be out of, office or whatever?
Oh, yes, thank you. I meant to mention that. He will be co-locating with Aula. They currently rent space at Cayuga Community College, so they're going to be sharing an office. Aula occupies that space 2 evenings a week, so we managed to get a good deal from the college to be housed there,
Okay.
use the resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeForest?
Just wanted to give a quick update on government ops. I met with Charlie Ripley and with Mike Didio on Friday. I had conversations with our chairman, Tucker, and with Keith. And we are attempting to proceed with the evaluation process of our county chairman. I distributed materials that Amanda and Sheila were put enough printout for me today and get together for us. I just want to mention a few things. What you'll find is there's one that's Manager's Evaluation Handbook. I'm not suggesting that every legislator needs to read all of this, but I would recommend that you at least take the time to, I believe it's page 3, read successful evaluation tips. We'll have good information throughout the whole booklet, but that one would help as we gather our information and materials to go forward in this process. Lots of times administrators are evaluated on the goals set by the organization. We as the legislature didn't really adopt goals last year, specific goals that we endorsed as a full body. So one of the things that we're hoping for is that between the two caucuses that we can come up with goals and present those to the body and hopefully get the endorsement of the body on those goals. The other two tools that may be useful as we gather your thoughts are we have from the contract section 4, which lists the duties of the administrator. They're listed in the contract. And also we have a document that we as a body endorsed that was prepared along with committee.
Supposed to fill this out.
By Mr. Miller that gives a job description. And the evaluation form is the form that the committee will be using. And it's up to, I would say, the head of the caucus, whether they want to use that within their membership or whatever, but I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page with what materials have been sent out and what the committee was using for a guide.
So this is the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The other thing that I'll just mention briefly, I met with Katie Lacey and Cheryl Geary, Board of Elections. And some of you, I know everyone's curious about where we're moving along in the redistricting process. And they will be coming to the Government Ops Committee meeting in February. They want to solicit more questions on what we have for questions as a body. And then they would like to present at the full-fledged meeting with answers to those questions. The other thing that they would like to do at the full-fledged meeting is give us an update on the impacts of what the new voter registration and electronic voting and so forth laws, how that will impact the county. So that's all I've got for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. Anybody else? All right, we will move on to County Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to ad lib on what Mr. DeForest said, as you know, election reform was passed, but it wasn't passed with a dedicated new source of funding. So while we all, I think, support the expanded opportunity to vote, we do need to, and NISAC is continuing to advocate on behalf of counties to ensure adequate funding for implementing that law. I believe anybody that's going to NISAC next week will hear a lot about that, as well as the other proposals in the executive budget. I did distribute earlier today, for those who hadn't already seen it, NISAC's interim budget evaluation. As the budget gets refined, there'll continue to be more information available, but we're going through it locally, and I wanted to share with you as soon as I had it what NISAC has shared. At Government Operations this month, we presented and unveiled a demonstration of the new county website. We're very close to being able to go live with that. Pleased to report that that was a very aggressive timeline. We kicked off with your support. Fall, September, we had the project kickoff. Going live here at the end of January is really a remarkable turnaround and a testament to all of the department heads and the staff liaisons that they assigned to work on the committee with my office. We're really pleased about that project. And I just want to also point out, in doing that, not only will we have a brand new website, but we will eliminate the hosting costs and open.gov that we discussed previously. The net savings of that will be $20,000 a year. So once the initial 3-year period is paid off for the new website, over the life of the 8-year contract, the website will actually cost us less than our current one does. So I think that's a really positive sign, and thank you for your support and the ability to move forward on that. I do have some good news to report on the labor negotiations. We reached tentative agreement with CSEA. I look forward to briefing you on the details of that at a later date, but that will be presented to the membership for vote, and we look forward to hopefully bringing that back for your consideration next month. I was asked to sit on the Cornell Cooperative Extension Executive Director search. I had two meetings with them on that, and I think that they're putting the pause button on, and I've strongly suggested that they do some strategic planning and figure out what it is they want to become before they go out and hire someone to lead them there. And there seems to be some good conversation going on there. So I look forward to following that and keeping you in the loop and working with those of you who serve on that board. The Water and Sewer Authority unveiled their draft plan, which I believe has been distributed to all of you. If it hasn't, please let me know, and I'll make sure you get an electronic or paper copy, whichever you prefer. There's some very strong recommendations in there and good analysis in terms of what the best path forward is and what the choices that will be presented to the legislature are for a path forward. And I look forward to your discussion and understanding what direction you want to go and working with you to implement that vision. That was a project that was partially funded by the county legislature, and ultimately any following through on any of those recommendations will require your leadership to do that. I mentioned NISAC. The NISAC conference is next week, so I assume many of you are going. The CETA forecast lunch is this Thursday. I believe you've received details on that. And as Mr. Lattimore said, there's been a number of news about the Veterans Clinic. I have discussed that with the hospital president. Jessica Strassel, who's our Veteran Services Director, is on maternity leave, but she has been reaching out to the local veterans community to get their input and feedback on that, and I think that's an important voice to have in place. So as we get more information, we'll keep you briefed, and look forward to understanding if the legislature as a whole wants to take a position on that discussion. And lastly, we had a big snowstorm. Some of you might have noticed, and I just want to say thank you to our new Public Works leadership and all of our employees. We did a really great job responding and keeping up with that. And David and all of our employees there, we're really making progress there in both keeping up with things and reporting and documenting things and continuing to invest in our training. We'll be meeting with New York State DOT later this week to get their feedback on our initial performance on the state roads, since we've recommitted to maintaining those roads, and we look forward to keeping you abreast of that. But good work, David, and please pass on to all of your team. Great work during the storm.
Mr. Lattimore.
Nice report. As Mr. Botar indicated, the broadband system, I mean, the website is nice, but if nobody's getting it outside the city limits, we've got to put the fiber in the ground. Thank you.
Anybody have anything? Mr. Foley.
Yeah, Justin, just two quick questions. One is, you said the plan will be presented to us at a later date for the second source of water, the general plan, to move forward on that for the vision. Do you have a timeline for that?
The plan is in draft format with the Water and Sewer Authority right now. It's open for public comment. Once that plan is finalized, I believe it will be presented to the Board of Directors of the Water and Sewer Authority, and I think that the natural process would then be for them to submit it to you with their recommendations to the legislature. So my understanding is that that's on pace to finish this spring. There are some critical infrastructure questions that fit into that I think we need to take up concurrently with those discussions, and I look forward to briefing you further on those as you get into that plan.
And then the second question was, for our special legislative meeting, we filled the technology officer position for at least the advertising portion of it. Do we have an update on what that will look like for us, how long the advertisement will be, and then what the next steps are after that?
The advertisement will be hitting the street this week. We'll be advertising it for about a month, which is typically what we do in these recruitments. We'll evaluate as they come in, so before the expiration of the advertisement, we'll know whether we need to extend it or we're prepared to start advertising. My hope is to bring you a candidate from the search committee as soon as I can.
Mr. Lattimore.
I know our college president is here today, and I've mentioned in a couple different committee meetings that the IT at the college and the IT here at the county, somehow we should be able to do some shared services on those aspects.
The president and I have a meeting on our calendar to discuss a number of items, including shared services. IT is on that list, as well as purchasing and some other areas. The other thing, Mr. Foley, just to finish answering your question, is that we do have the new team, the CIO, the interim CIO and deputy from Entree on board now. They started last week meeting with people, and the transition process there is going very smooth. We've been very impressed with their project management approach to understanding what our needs are and starting to systematically go through and assess our IT needs, both from an operational standpoint as well as a security standpoint.
Thanks, Justin.
Anything else for the administrator? If not, go into the chairman's report, which getting my feet under me, at least the one that's not broken. So as far as the report, I don't have much to report. Most of what I've done this month is drive Sheila and the attorney's office absolutely nuts, and they are well-versed in bylaws of committees. So if you have any questions for them on that, now's the time. We've got most of them memorized. There's still a few that need to be sorted out, but when we figure them out, we'll get to those ones. That's really all I have, unless anyone has anything else for me. But if not, we'll move along into the resolutions.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we have our regular monthly resolutions, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D.
Move them.
Second.
Discussion on those? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
In addition, we have WM 1 and 2, which I would like to offer as a bundle unless anybody would like them separated.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Health and Human.
Okay, Health and Human Services had 17 resolutions. I'd like to separate a couple of them out for voting purposes. First, there were two that were amended, one at committee and one since our Health and Human Services meeting in Ways and Means. HH3 was amended. It appears to rescind a resolution that was passed in 2017, which established the contract with Cayuga Counseling for youth case management at a unit of service rate through 2020. And actually, the contract being forward and proposed for 2019 was for a flat rate for that contract in the amount of $180,000. So in order to get that passed, we needed to rescind the 2017 resolution. Also, HH13 was a contract between mental health and the psychiatrist working under contract. This was amended at the time of the meeting because when we passed the 2019 budget, the funds for this psychiatrist were put in the mental health budget in their .1 salaries line, and we needed to move that $75,000 to the .4 contract line. So I'd like to entertain a motion to move HH3 and HH13.
You want to bundle 3 and 13?
Yep, please.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Petrus?
I'd like the record to reflect that I'm abstaining from HH3, please.
Okay. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And 1 abstention. Thank you.
Now I'd like to separate HH2 and HH4 to give Mr. Petrus an opportunity to abstain from those. They're both contracts with Cayuga Counseling. They were both renewal contracts and put in our 2019 budget.
Is there a motion?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And 1 abstention.
Right, for both.
The remaining resolutions all passed through both committees. They are HH1, HH5 through 12, HH14 through 17. I'd offer them up as a bundle unless anyone wants to separate them out.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are carried. Thank you. Government ops.
Chairman, Government Act has 3 resolutions. I've read them through both committees, and I would like to offer them as a bundle.
Move them.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are carried. Thank you, Mr. DeForest. Planning.
Planning has 2 resolutions that have been through committee and have passed. I'd like to offer them up as a bundle.
Is there a motion?
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are carried. Thank you, Mr. Ripley. Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Works has 2 resolutions. I'd like to offer them up as bundles. They've been through committee and passed.
Move them.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are carried. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Judicial.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judicial and Public Safety has 3 resolutions. They've been through both committees, and I'd like to offer them as a bundle, please.
Move them.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. And thank you, Mr. Petrus. We will move on to the ledge resolutions now. Is there a motion for ledge 1?
Move it.
Second.
Is there discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are moved. Ledge 2. Is there a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lee. Discussion? Mr. Dennison?
Yeah, I know we've gotten this before, but I can't remember, and I don't want to take the time to look it up right now. What's this costing us again?
$24,000.
That's what I thought it was, okay.
Mr. Foley?
Just to be clear, this entire proposal was scheduled for about like 9 to 12 months for the entire study. Is that correct, Justin?
Yes, the goal will be to have this information in time to make a recommendation to you concurrent with the budget process.
Anybody else? Mr. Batman?
Yeah, I just want to point out, this is a study that's going to look at our non-bargaining, the salaries and positions and so on. Given that, it's going to be important to segregate the people that work in consultation with our consultants from the people that will potentially benefit or be affected by the results. So that's important as we put together the group that's going to work. And I also suggest that because this is fundamentally a legislative decision and legislative process, that the majority of the people that are working with the consultant, in addition to administrator, of course, they should probably be legislators. But I'm not making that a motion or anything. It's just an observation, a comment. I'll leave it to the chair.
Okay. Noted. And Commissioner Dennison?
Yeah, one more quick thing on that. I mean, I don't know how they're doing it, but emphasize, we want things spelled out, how they came to this, because I've always asked that when we do these salaries. You know, who are you comparing it to, blah, blah, blah.
When we interviewed them, they presented a pretty thoughtful methodology that looked at both not just the market, but also understanding, updating all of the job criteria so that the job classifications reflect the duties as needed. And then not just looking at the market from an external perspective, but also looking at internal equity throughout the value to the organization. So it was a pretty comprehensive proposal, and we were very pleased with the meeting that we had with the consultant.
Any other discussion on this resolution? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's carried. I would now entertain, Tim?
Mr. Petrus and, not Mr. Petrus, but Chris Palermo and Mr. Cuddy and I, and we heard a proposal from a BMC Consultants, and I think Elaine was in tough negotiations with labor, so she couldn't be there. But the proposal is for transportation on some of our handicap. And I think there was, something was sent over in regards to putting a bid spec together, and I think the timing is kind of close, so we might need some help, I don't know, but anyways, being a member of that board, I ran into him, and I thought he was good, and he's worked with the county in years past, so.
Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
I need an executive session.
Oh, sorry. I move the executive session for
Contract
negotiations.
Second.
That's what I meant.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's carried. We're not taking any action, right? Won't be any action after this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Foley, for all the support.
I wish I could.